Building in Perth, everything you wish you knew in 5 informative episodes. Available on YouTube, Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Welcome back for a cheeky bonus episode. My name's Dezo and this is the Building in Perth podcast. This is a little bit of an idea that I thought I'd put together just to help people through their colour selections. Now, I'm by no means an interior designer, but I'm pretty savvy with how to put things together. So what we're going to do is basically go through one of my clients' homes who needed to select his colours. His name's Mike, built a little home down in Success that we custom designed together. It was based on one of our standard designs, and then went through and sort of rehashed it all because he wanted to have a putting green out the back. He's a pretty keen golfer. He had a pretty good sense of taste and things like that, and gave me a bit of an idea about what he wanted. Now, truth be told, actually, he ended up doing his own colours because I was unable to make the meeting at the time. But I'm just going to kind of go through and put it together quickly from kind of like memory, and we'll kind of go through it together and kind of put together a rough colour scheme for his home. So without further ado, I guess, look, when you come to pre-start, you want to have a really good idea of exactly what it is you're trying to achieve before you even get here. Do not make this a place where you make decisions. You want to already know exactly what it is you're doing. Don't treat it like an interior design consult because you are sort of limited for time, and it's really important that you're really going through and I guess just finalizing selections, not making decisions on the fly. Don't put yourself under that pressure because it's just going to end up with a bad result if you're sort of rushing things, okay? So have a really clear idea of what you want before you start. Now, always use resources like Pinterest and Houzz and Instagram and things like that to scrapbook ideas, get a really good idea of what you want. Go through a process of elimination until you kind of get a clear idea of the direction you want to take your colours. So, without further ado, I'm just going to be wandering around the selection room, and I've got a few different cameras set up all over the place, and I'll try and edit it together in some sort of fashion later on. Now, one of the things Mike did tell me at the time was that he was pretty keen on like a red brick type scenario. So I'm just going through some of the drawers here of the different finishes and things that we've got. Now, where we first ended up was a brick kind of like this one. Now, this is a brick with a little bit of black or blue that sort of runs through it. So immediately we sort of segue to, well, okay, what goes kind of well with that? So we started talking about window frames. Now, as you can see, there's a bit of blue or black in that brick, and it picks up this black coloured frame really quite nicely. Now, that was originally going to be the brickwork for the back of the home because the front was going to be rendered, okay? Now, what we ended up having, and look, this is just for ourselves here at Celebration, but it could be for any other builder for that matter. They probably got upgrade options as well, was that it was an upgrade option to upgrade the whole home to a single course brick kind of like this one. Now, I suggested to him that we do that for the entire home, the front included, so you've got a nice consistent look throughout the home. It looks like a recycled brick, which is generally going to be pretty expensive, but this doesn't have what we call a tumbled edge, which is that rounded edge. It's just a straight cut edge. Now that ties in really nicely with your black window frames as well, right? So we decided to basically go down that path and explore that rather than these big old 2-course bricks. So if you do have a little bit of money up your sleeve, I think that these single course bricks, particularly some of these cool new styles that are coming out, can be a really cool way to do it. So we kind of started there with that and some black window frames. Now, one of the other things you really want to check out, and I guess start with, if you like, is going to be some sort of internal hero. So figure out whether it's going to be the floor, figure out whether it's going to be a cabinet. So some people really want to make a focus of their cabinet work and have, say, wood grain cabinets or something like that. In which case, you'll probably go for a fairly plain floor. In Mike's case, he wanted a bit of a hero floor, right? So we're looking at composite planks, much like these ones here. Now, there are a few different, I guess, types of these planks available. You've got rigid type planks like those, which is what I would call a composite. You've then also got, I guess, more like a vinyl plank. They're both really good products and really resilient. One's floppy, one's hard. But anyway, we're going to grab out a few colours that would go with Mike's sort of colour scheme, right? So I'm going to take a few across there and we'll see what we come out with. So probably want something that picks up a little bit of the black of the window frames, ideally. So what I'm going to do is take these over there. This large tile that's actually on the bench here would also tie in quite nicely, that sort of concretey look with the the recycled bricks that we've got there as well. But I'll come back to that later because we might use that as like a wet area tile or a feature tile or something like that for the front. So, all right, here's our floor. So this is going to be a really, really dominant feature inside because it's going to run through the whole place, right? So it's important we get this right. Now, I kind of almost just go through a bit of a process of elimination to see what kind of works. Like that would definitely work, gives it a bit of a warm, I don't know, country-ish sort of feel. I really don't like that one. It's a little bit too, I don't know, orange or something. The grey looks pretty cool if we want to go with a bit more of a contemporary twist. I really quite like that one. Picks up the black nicely. That one there might have a little bit too much orange as well. So there we go. I've narrowed it down to kind of 3 that I want to work with. And when you're going through this process, I would always keep, a couple of samples aside as well that you'd kind of said, yeah, that will work. Because as you start to go through things like your stone and your cabinets, you might end up swapping these things in and out. So through process of elimination, I know I don't want these ones, right? So we'll put those to the side. Now, I guess from our cabinet work, we really want to have a think about, okay, you've got to think about the big picture, right? So we've got to think about cabinet work, we've got to think about the stone, we've got to think about things like tap fittings. So with Mike, as an example, he did want to use matte black tapware, okay? And use like an off-formy concrete sort of look stone bench top. So with that brief in mind, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the stone next and then the matte black tapware as well, which is a very bold feature, right? So it's something we need to focus on pretty early on in getting these colors right. Now, what I'm going to do is actually just grab a piece of window frame that will kind of just represent our matte black tapware, right? Because it's pretty close in color, right? All right, so let's get our piece of stone next. So a couple of different ideas in terms of where we can go with color, okay? So got lots and lots of different colored stone in here to play with. All right, so our black can pop nicely against that sort of grey colour there. It looks really cool. It can also work really, really well against the very dark type grey, right? Now, immediately I'm looking at these on the table here and I'm going, well, none of them really seem to work with this golden colour timber immediately. So we get rid of that one, right? Now, all of these on here, they look really good with this lighter grey colour, definitely. And they also work really, really well with this almost warmer tone. I'm going to go with the warmer one for the time being, just because I think it feels a little bit nicer, if you like. Now, where we're going to go with this next is going to be our cabinet colour, and that's going to be something that's relatively plain. So I've got the cabinet colours up behind me, so I'm just going to have a drink. And we're going to have a bit of a play with the colours there. So what I'm going to do is probably look for warmer tones of white. So do be aware that whites aren't just white, okay? So you'll actually notice usually under daylight it's a little bit easier, but you'll have warmer tones of white, cooler tones of white, and depending on what other colours you've got there, they can sort of look quite different. So that one, classic white, might be okay. I'm going to look for some sort of more greyish sort of tones as well, just to see how they might work. And like I was saying, I'm certainly no pro at this. I sort of just fumble my way through it and get a bit of an idea about what might look good. That might actually look kind of cool for an overhead. Remember, yeah, if you've got overhead cupboards, you don't necessarily need to do them the same colour as the ones that are down low as well. It can be nice to have something that's a little bit different going on there. Actually, this can look quite good. So I'm not sure whether you can actually see from the camera there, and I'll take a picture of this later, but this cabinet colour here is actually relatively close to this floor. It's not exactly the same, but if you were to use this as an overhead cabinet, you aren't really going to pick the difference between those two, right? So what I'm going to do is work under the sort of presumption that's going to be an overhead cabinet, and I'm going to use maybe this white gloss as the primary lower cabinet color. So let's pop these back away, and then what we might go through is figuring out what stone is going to work. Okay, so I think the dark on it's just going to be way too full on. I think we should go with the lighter one for sure. All right, so let's start sort of piecing some of this together a little bit. So what's always really important with this as well is that this might look a little bit plain Jane at the moment, and it should, right? Because we're going to be adding things like soft furnishings and things like that to it. So I always say it's important to kind of like have a context plant, and I'll take a picture of that later on so you can kind of almost put things into perspective with how things might look once you add plants and things like rugs and furniture and stuff like that into the mix. So in my opinion, your color selection should look super plain by themselves, because by the time you add other stuff in, that's what, like if you go nuts on your color selection so your color palette looks really cool on the table, then by the time you add all this other stuff in, it's just going to look like a complete mess a lot of the time. All right, so I'm pretty sure we probably won't end up going with that one. Now, what we've also got to deal with here is, say, a kitchen splashback, wet area tiling, and what actually looks pretty cool with, I guess, this sort of vibe. Be something like a subway tile would probably work relatively well. So they're the ones that are little ones like this with like a darker coloured grout. You'd never ever use black. You'd always use dark grey, because with black grout, the salts from the brickwork and things can actually come through. So, and kind of give you white marks. I should probably clarify what I meant there. So that looks pretty cool with a subway tile. We don't want to get too crazy with anything splashback wise in the kitchen. Remember, we've got things like black tapware and that sort of stuff, which do make a pretty big statement. You don't want to overcook it. Now we'll think about doing carpet and wet area stuff. So other floor colorings in the floor coverings, I should say, in the house. Right. So I'm going to take this big water carpet. This is what we call cut pile carpet, right? So this is the one that looks like it's got a haircut. I mentioned it in the podcast before. That's what we call the loop pile, which is the one that's been sort of knitted almost, and that's the one where animals can get their claws underneath it and unpick it. So for this one, we're basically going to go with the cut pile side of things. So bit of a process of elimination with this a lot of the time. I know that our beiges probably aren't going to go too well with that, certainly not that one. What are we going to go with? Wow, there's a blue now. That's a new color. That's not too bad. That one's pretty good. This one is pretty nice. Yeah, I think we'll probably go down that path. All right, so sometimes I unscrew these so it's easier to manage, but I'm not going to do it just for doing what we're doing at the moment, because I'm trying to do this relatively quick so my camera batteries don't die. All right, so now we've got our carpet in there as well, which looks pretty cool. Now, I was kind of going down a bit of a path with this as well, with it being like having a little hint of grey in there, simply for the fact that I know what I wanted to tie in with this sort of recycled brickwork was going to be some sort of almost concrete-y style tile. Okay, so I was kind of thinking ahead there, and it ties in well with the carpet. So this sort of combination here, and I'm not sure whether you can see this, but and I might even go with a lighter concrete in the end, but matte black against concrete with this sort of recycled brick look does look really cool. I'm just seeing if I've got another lighter concrete color that might be more appropriate. Okay, let's have a look around here. Kernel ash. Yeah, that might be a little bit better. Yeah, that's better. It's just that little bit lighter. I don't like something that's going to be too dark, obviously. So let's chuck this one back. So we're kind of looking at wet area wall tiles, potentially floor tile as well here. That looks pretty neat. So just going to bring that one over here. Now remember, with your wet area tiling, it's going to generally butt into your main floor, but it's also going to butt into the carpet, right? So it will butt into the main floor, generally in your minor bathrooms, and then in your master suite to ensuite, it's going to butt into the carpet. So, I mean, all the colors as a whole need to make sense anyway, but just remember that all of those are going to be seen sort of in conjunction with each other at one point in time. So, all right, so I guess that grey is that sort of concretey colour is really going to be our wet area type tiling. On the floor, we might be able to carry the same thing through. In fact, I mean, I kind of like that. I don't like putting too many colours and textures into areas personally, just for this reason, where you're sort of adding furnishings and things later and plants and things like that. Green, again, like a plant, also pops really well against that concrete colour, and when I give you a photo of this at the end, you'll kind of see what I'm talking about. If anything, if you're going to add something to the bathroom, maybe it would just be a plain white tile onto the wall or something like that would also work, but I think for all intents and purposes, we'll just leave it with the grey at the moment. So that pretty much wraps up the internal colours. Now what I'm going to touch on is the external stuff. So the external stuff, in terms of, say, if you're going with a render for the front, that's an area where you've got, I guess, the most flexibility, because there's simply so many colors. So, I mean, we've got drawers and drawers full of colors and samples and things here, but, you know, when you're choosing render colors and paint colors, you've got paint swatches much like that, or might be able to show that camera instead, just how many you've got to choose from, right? So it's better to kind of choose the things where you've got a limited range first and kind of work your way out, to a degree anyway, to the areas where you've got lots of colors, which is things like your paint. So one thing I will choose first is paving. Now, for this one, funnily enough, I mean, you can use things like exposed aggregate and all of that sort of thing, of course, which is that poured concrete with little stones in it. But remember that for what Mike was looking to do with his house, we're using those recycled look bricks, which are actually, there's a lot going on, if you like. So the brick is the hero. We don't want to detract from that. So a plain sort of dark sort of charcoal paver is actually going to work pretty well in terms of that color scheme, because we want the brick to be the hero. We don't want there to be too much. Remember, we've got landscaping and things as well to factor in. So what I think we'll look at next is something to do with the roof and the garage doors, and then we'll come back to maybe if there's going to be some sort of feature render, which I think there would be, and logically that's going to match probably the garage door and roof type scenarios. So I'd be thinking that we'll go with a relatively dark color. So probably something along the lines of Monument, Woodland Grey, Basalt, if I can find my friend Basalt anywhere. There we go. And I'm going to take a lighter color over as a maybe, just for potentially the fascia, which is the strip just below the gutter. It can actually look good to kind of make the roof appear anyway like it's floating. So okay, so certainly Basalt or Monument is probably going to be the go. In fact, do you know what might even look good? And I don't think I've got a sample here. Well, I'll go with Monument for now, just for what we're doing, but there is another color which is essentially black called Night Sky, which would look really, really striking on the roof. I think it would look pretty cool. And would we get away with that strip? Maybe. yeah, so I think that would actually look good. Kind of like a lightish grey for the fascia. What can look really cool, I like to do this with homes wherever I can, is darker sort of coloured roof, and then the fascia, which is that little strip below the gutter, you do a lighter colour, and it kind of just gives this the roof this, sort of little bit of an illusion that it kind of floats, if you like. So the last bit that we'll go through with the external colours there, I mean, normally what you would do if you were having a rendered front elevation, for example, this is going to be face brick essentially with like a feature render, right? So that will be the feature render if we use it. But if you're using render across the whole front, one little tip here, right, is to grab a whole bunch of colors that you think would be your primary render. So the color that's going to be on the front the most, right? So let's just hypothetically say it was a whitish sort of color, right? Grab a whole bunch of them and then have your colors all laid out. Then just basically go up there and just go yes, no, yes, yes, no. And do it by process of elimination till you find the right fit. And then do your secondary render color after that. That's usually the process I would follow. Might take this nice little ornament for our picture later on. I think it might tie in with that color scheme nicely. All right, so we've really been through just about everything there. I think I've covered it all off. Most of the rest of the stuff is really to do with shape. So focus on color first, your internal color selections, external color selections, then worry about things like your basin shapes and stuff like that, because they're always going to be, most of the time anyway, like a white porcelain, right? So that really just comes down to shape. And shape's important as well, but that's another discussion altogether. All right, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically grab some pictures of this and lay it out in a little bit more of a nice fashion for you, so you can kind of see what I've put together. And like I said, I've just done this very quickly. It's by no means perfect, but it was more just to give you a bit of an idea about the type of thought process that you need to go through when doing your colors. See ya.
Building in Perth, everything you wish you knew in 5 informative episodes. Available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.